Thank you, Bernard.
130 years, and finally you are succeeding. Huh?
Yes,
Well done.
yes, yeah. Mining is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So the presentation is very simple. It's not really a presentation. It's just a few points that I'll be referring to as we go along. And it's capital investment strategy. And I must say that having listened to some of the talks earlier today, I might maybe change the sequence a little bit. And in fact, I'm going to go through all three of these. This is about as much razzle-dazzle as I can put together. So I'm going to put all of those together because they really talk to each other. They sort of overlap. And take you through these different considerations. The capital investment considerations are the ones on the right. And what we did pursuant to those are the ones on the left. So I'll be referring to some of the different projects that we did and at which stage in our company's existence we were putting those into effect. So the first one, resource optimization and flat average head grade. Having listened to the presentations this morning, there's actually one before that's about survival. And you remember the old Alec Hogg weekends that we used to do. Mark Lamberti used to talk at those, and I remember him once saying that as a business, your number one strategy is going to be survival. So your capital investment strategy is going to be towards how do I make myself survivable. And survival was really, in that initial phase of capital allocation, our primary consideration. And I'm talking 2005 here, when the transition of DRD away from deep level underground mine towards surface reclamation, when that really started, when it became apparent that this is the route that we have to go. At the time, DRD was focusing on two very distinct jurisdictions, Indonesia or Papua New Guinea, that region, the Rim of Fire, and South Africa. And our reality at the time was that the executive of DRD was applying all of our capital resources towards that footprint. And here in South Africa, the only money that we had to spend was the money that we made. So, and if we didn't spend the right money in the right place, we were not going to be around for very long. So, initial big capital decision that I had to take in my very young career was allocating 21 million rand, which we were going to make, hopefully, towards fixing up a residue line at the Crown operations, because that's where the potential for cash flow was. Survival meant generating cash, because if we didn't generate cash, there was no money and this business was going to go down. And I suppose the three distinct phases in our capital allocation history were survival, first and foremost. The second one was resource optimization, and I'll spend a little bit of time on that. In fact, the second one was building resilience. That was the in-between one. So it's survival, the first one, building resilience, the second one, and resource optimization, which I believe we're at now at this stage. And through these stages and through these phases, the projects became a little bit more ambitious as we went along. So we had put in this residue line, and the focus was now going to be developing the surface operation. It recently acquired Ergo. And the thing with dumps is that the grade is not consistent. They start at like 0.25 gram a ton, and they go all the way up to about 0.45 gram a ton. And if you only mine one, and if you mine the wrong ones, and you don't mine them in the right sequence, or you don't achieve the right blend, then frankly, you're not going to optimize your ore body, and you're going to become less survivable. So what we had to figure out early on was, how do we achieve a profile, a life of mine that assumed a flat average head grade? And that was then going to inform basically also what your infrastructure was going to look like. Because flat average head grade over life, that gives you an indication as to, assuming a 55% recovery rate, what your revenue per ton was going to be. And if you know what your revenue per ton is going to be, then you know what your cost per ton has to be in order to make a profit going forward. And that ultimately depends on two things. The one is economies of scale, in other words, how much you've got to put through your plant, and secondly, your recovery efficiency. Those were the key drivers. And to a large extent, the second phase of investment, the post-survival, initial survival phase, was how do we link up these different sites? Ellburg, 180 million tons. Van Dijk, Topstar, all the way through to Ergo, et cetera, and setting up that network to enable us to get the right blend in the right sequence or the right proportion through this plant. And that was about 360 million rand. At the same time also with internal cash flows. We generated the cash ourselves. You do get to a point though where economies of scale become limited, where you start bumping against your throughput capacity or throughput ceiling. And you're not going to dilute your cost per ton by just adding to your tons. You've actually now got to start saving on a per ton basis. That's where technology comes in. And our technology came in the way of a centralized water plant, which also beautifully delivered into the environmental capital stock, part of sustainable development. And now more recently in terms of our solar plant. So the solar plant can save us about 15 Rand a ton. And because we could do that now, we no longer have to produce at 2.1 million ton a month at Ergo. In fact, we can only produce at 1.8 million ton a month. But the solar farm has now changed that combination, that cost composite, that relationship between throughput, recovery, and cost, where lower throughput can still achieve the requisite unit cost line. And that's because of that 15 Rand saving. So setting up Ergo in the way that we did, that was a big part of building resilience, making sure that we've got the right mix coming from all sorts of different parts. And in fact, now that the technology aspect has come in, we're now in a position where we can focus on optimizing this ore body going forward. So Ergo's had a wonderful run. It was going to close about 3-4 years ago. I think the changes in the gold price has now put us in a position where we can reset this whole thing. And Ergo is now going into Ergo Phase 2. It's actually now linking up a whole new range of assets and, as I say, benefiting from this different cost profile, having put the solar plant in place. So the network I spoke about, the risk, the water I spoke about, power, of course, is also a really big risk. So it's not just the cost saving, but it's having access to that power. The second one, they plan big and execute small. Yeah, we heard a lot about, so where do you get your funding from, et cetera, et cetera. Now, being who we are and having had to focus on cash flow and cash flow generation as much as we did in the early stages, we still actually don't spend money we don't make. We've had to dip into debt occasionally over the years. When we acquired Far West Gold operations from Sibanye, there was a little bit of debt at the time. It's also the only time then we had a small hedge to make sure that we don't start testing some of those debt covenants. But the one thing that we've always tried to do in executing on large projects is, as I say, plan big but execute small, which basically means that right from the outset, at the early stages of this project, you imagine it in its full potential, as big as it could potentially become. And then you start executing, but you start executing in accordance with your capacity at the time, with due regard to your balance sheet and without creating undue balance sheet risk. So you start implementing almost incrementally or in a modular fashion, and you try to get a cash flow as quickly as possible. And Far West Gold is a very good illustration of that point. So when we acquired Far West Gold, the model at the time assumed a 3 million ton a month throughput and approximately 9 billion Rand worth of capital. There was just absolutely no way that we were going to be able to do that. I think our market cap at the time was like 2 billion Rand. So what we did was manage to secure a plant that was in the process of closing down from Sibanye-Stillwater, and also a tailings dam that they were no longer using. And we got to cash flow very, very quickly, like 5 months. We had this plant repurposed, we had it linked up with the main reclamation site, and we also had it linked up with the tailings deposition site, running at 500,000 tons a month. Now, it's a spectacular asset, and it enabled us to really generate very, very healthy cash flows. Unfortunately, at the time, there was a bit of a distortion of this healthy mix scenario because we were mining a very high-grade site. But we kept quite a lot of the cash back, and that cash is now going into Far West Phase 2. So early stage cash flow, and that's enabling us to now build Far West 2. So you may have heard of Vision 28. Vision 28 is the extension of Ergo for about another 15 to 18 years, enabled by the solar farm and the water. Far West Gold Phase 2 is one in terms of which we're building a really large tailings disposal facility or storage facility, the RTSF, coupling that with an upgrade of the plant to a 1.2 million ton a month facility. That's going to cost us quite a bit of money. I think it's about 4.6 million or thereabouts. We have a facility, but now the gold price is helping us. And having invested all of this money to survive well into this embedded resilience, we now can take advantage of this really attractive gold price. And there's some pictures of what it is that we're building, and I'm going to leave that up there, and you can ask some questions about that as we go along if you want. But there's the tailings facility. I mean, we're building a tailings dam that has a 100-meter wide starter wall, 25 meters high. It's going to go up several levels, and it's going to be a downstream dam. So it's going to go all the way down to where this is, 800 hectares, large enough to accommodate everything from Repurposing all the way through to Carletonville. So that's been the approach in terms of capital investment. I do have to talk just a little bit, if you'll allow me, about sustainable development, because there's talk about ESG and what it does and so forth and so forth. Very early on in my career, the idea of catering only for one stakeholder, class of stakeholders, namely the shareholders, and our shareholders were sort of revolving door shareholders, that really became a little bit hollow. So we had to become relevant also in terms of those stakeholders with whom we had a slightly longer-term relationship. Our employees, to start with, and then secondly also our communities. And there's a lot of focus on trying to become relevant in terms of those stakeholders. And I think the model or the idea that we stumbled upon, that we landed upon, that could facilitate all of this, was the whole idea of sustainable development. And sustainable development, if you read through its various capital stocks, you could see that it's really just a wider, broader, deeper, as far as I'm concerned, more useful version of ESG. And the one thing that sustainable development teaches you, even if you're not focusing entirely on just the different capital stocks, this idea or this notion of integrated thinking. And having listened to some of the challenges that many of the other speakers were talking about earlier today, on getting stuff executed and so forth, I can tell you that one of the biggest problems in companies today that underperform is teams are out of sync. The environmental guy is doing this, the logistics guy is doing that, the purchase department is doing this, the governance and compliance department is running independently of everything else. Integrated thinking, which is core to sustainable development, teaches you not only how to create value, overlapping and integrated value in terms of the sustainable development capital stocks. It teaches you how to approach your job in an integrated fashion. And I'll share one final idea with you with 3 seconds left. Maybe I can go a little bit deeper into that.
Steal 1 or 2 minutes.
Can I steal 1 or 2 minutes? So this is how we do it at DRD. Sustainable development is core to our thinking. Sustainable development is our model. But this is how we apply it also in terms of management approach. At DRD, you don't get paid a bonus because you scored 4 out of 5 on your KPI score, a bonus in proportion to your salary. If you score 4 out of 5 or 3.5 out of 5, you qualify for a bonus. But that bonus is a percentage participation in the product of the collective effort of the entire business, a cash pool. You make money, you earn the right to share in that money. That means that you don't ever end up in front of a door where there's somebody who is so important that he makes you wait for your pump or for your license or for this or for that, because he knows if he makes you wait, then he's burning cash and his bonus is going to be smaller. So that's what integrated thinking, sustainable development-based integrated thinking teaches you. And I think a lot of the problems that we're dealing with here, which we attribute to all sorts of external factors, and this is me being the optimist, is attributed rather to the fact that we're out of sync. Teams are out of sync. We've got little firms running within big firms and running in opposite direction as opposed to pulling together in the same direction. I don't know if anything I said was original, Bernard, but that's pretty much why we are where we are and why I think we're here.
I don't think you need to be original. You are credible. How long have you been running this weird little company now?
So I joined it in 2003. And
When did you become the CEO?
I became CEO of the DRD SA operations 2005 and DRDGold in 2009, January 2009. So
That's a long
I'm a
years.
veteran, yes.
So the successes and the failures are now has got your name next to it. No?
Yes, yes. That's it. The scar tissue is still right there. It's on surface, and yeah, we've been very, very fortunate because I think we adopted the right approach to the business early on, and we're very committed to the 3 Ps. It's actually now become 4 Ps. It's namely patience, perseverance, and prayer. And we've added a 4th one now, planning. You can't do things like these unless you do proper planning. But yeah, so
So
we've been
Hume
very
Skulls
fortunate.
would not approve of you as a CEO because you're a lawyer by background. You're
I was
not
very offended by that
you're
statement.
not a geologist or an engineer.
I was very offended by Hume's statement, and I intend to confront him.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. So can we unpack a little bit? So I don't quite know why did you end up as some sort of quasi-division of Sibanye? Unpack the logic.
So I'll tell you exactly what happened. So Ergo was obviously was it one horse show? I think whatever.
One asset, yeah.
There's one asset, and we were going to mine ourselves into a wedge. And the best asset in South Africa from a surface operation perspective was the Far West Gold combinations, the old Kloof and Driefontein tailings, and they were fantastic, and they were not being developed. So
Can you tell us the grades? I would love to know. What are the grades there?
I don't want to. I'll tell you, but then I'll have to kill you, Bernard. They're really good. They're much
But the
higher on average.
metallurgist would have claimed it was 0.2 grams a ton, and you found a bit more than
Well,
that.
we're finding anything up to 0.4, 0.5. In fact, when we acquired the asset
Bloody
and
metallurgist.
we published the numbers, I got an email from a former geologist at
Yeah.
Driefontein, and he said, "Young man, you're going to be pleasantly surprised when you see what those grades are, because remember, the grades were so high, the head grade was so high, they sacrificed a little bit of efficiency for throughput because it was doing so
It's
well. So
legitimate.
they left us an extra 0.2 gram a ton. So, sorry, what was the question?
The question was, what the hell are you doing with Sibanye on your
Oh, yeah,
share
so
register?
how was the deal done? So we
See,
approached
when
them.
two old men talk, you have to keep us on track
Yes.
here. Okay, just keep us on track here.
That's exactly it. That's exact. Somebody offered me a seat on a train the other day.
We can't share our walking stick.
So we approached Sibanye, said we want to buy this asset. We think that we need to put it all together. Dennis Tucker played a key role in that. Niel Pretorius said to me right at the outset, listen, we could do this, but remember, my board will not allow us to dispose of this asset because of its strategic significance, the tailings dam in particular, unless we take a controlling stake. Went back and said, listen, guys, we can own the best asset in South Africa, if not the world, from a tailings perspective. But it means we're going to have to put ourselves under the control of Sibanye. We look at who they are, we look at their value system, we think that it's aligned, and we took the decision, we took the plunge, and I'm glad that we did.
So I was quite surprised when I saw all the tailings all over the country, gold tailings, including the Krugersdorp and so Evander, they're all getting reworked. But I would have thought you had a dominant footprint and could have owned it all. What did I miss? Why did you not expand faster? What inhibited you? What in your strategy are you looking back and say, and that's why we are where we are?
Yes.
For good or for bad? I'm not judging on
Yes, no,
question.
absolutely. No, I think it's a fair question. Look, you can pretend to grow by buying as many tailings dams as you can, but that's not really growth. That's just really hurting your balance sheet, because you've got to look after these things before you start mining them. And if your throughput rate is determined by the rate at which you can deposit, and you can't really go through 2 million tons, then it means that you get to these new dumps only in 10 or 15 years' time. In the meantime, you have the environmental costs associated with that. And frankly, a lot of these dams are being bought and they're being stored for future use. We think that being patient, maybe it's not lost forever. It might come back to us. But what we own at the moment is what we could responsibly deal with in the next 15 years. The tailings dam that we're building, the one that you saw the picture of, we only have about 250 million tons of material. That tailings dam is ultimately going to be able to take 800 million tons
Okay.
of material. So even if we don't own it, Bernard, we believe that all of the mine waste in the West Rand, from Repurposing all the way through to Carletonville, ultimately need to end up on that tailings dam, because that's where it no longer poses an environmental threat
Are these new
and
dams
a
lined?
nuisance. This is lined. This is also why it's a center line downstream land, because it is lined.
But I mean, simplistically, a new dam meets different standards to the old dams that you are reworking. So I mean, not only do you often move them away from where they no longer should be, but you also deposit them on a much better facility.
Absolutely, it's a complete, but it's a textbook example of not just circular economy, but also sustainable development. Remember, we produce gold without generating a single ounce of additional waste, and using grey water and using renewable energy to do that.
The one thing, when I read the new bill, which apparently not many people in this room has read, goes to this question. The new bill looks to expropriate tailings where they don't obtain the mining right. There's some time issue there. How will this affect your business? How are you reading the new bill when it comes to tailings? Is it an opportunity or a threat, and how so?
No, it is a threat, but it's one that I believe we can manage, and we'll manage it like we've managed any other threat in South Africa. I think one of the reasons why DRD is still around is the fact that if you decide to be here, then be here. Don't be here and then wish you were somewhere else and complain about everything that's going wrong. Do something about it, and there are ways and means of doing it. I mean, Jumskals was sitting here earlier today after he had insulted all the lawyers in the mining industry. He made the point that...
A good point there. Yes. One good point you made.
He made the point that there's only one mining license that's been withdrawn. And we've been going on ooh and ahhing, and they're going to take the license over. Well, that's nonsense. Deal with the issue. Call it by its first name and deal with the issue. We're a constitutional democracy, and we'll run out of problems long before we run out of solutions if you deal with them decisively. I'm not saying that this is mining heaven, but it's if you put your mind to it, and if you are honest to yourself about the challenges that you face. I mean, I remember starting to work for DRD, our security bill was 5 million, maybe 10 million rand a year. We're spending 170 million rand a year on security. Why? Because there's a massive gap in the security that is being supplied by the authorities. So I can spend every Sunday, and complain about just the shocking state that security is in, or I can do something about it. So we assume that we are entitled to protect our staff and to protect our assets, and that we can establish proportionate capacity to do just that. And that's what we have, costing us 170 million rand. But we can afford to do that. And so on and so on and so on. The same applies to water, the same applies to power, the same applies to everything else. This bill is a bill. There are going to be hundreds of conversations before it's implemented, and even after it's implemented, it's not the end of the world. Once again, we're a constitutional democracy, and maybe one of the benefits of being a lawyer in mining is that you see things for what they are. And many lawyers will tell you what the limitations are that the law imposes on what you do. I have a slightly different approach because when I was a lawyer, my clients were in really big trouble, and I had to be a little bit more innovative. So I use the law as a tool, as a machine to see where can the law, if applied innovatively, where can it take me? It's never left me down. It's never let me down, rather. We've obtained licenses when senior counsel said that we wouldn't get them, not by lying or by manipulating anything, but just being a little bit more innovative and using law for the potential of the law as opposed to the restrictions and so forth. So it's not all lost, Bernard. It's going to be interesting that we're going to be saying some nasty things to each other and so forth. We're not budging on this. That's maybe one other thing. There is no room for compromise on this act. There is no free carry sort of going to be facilitated in terms of the minerals of South Africa. I think we've done our part. I think we've made the contribution in good faith. We've added very significant value and created an opportunity or a platform for that to happen. And going forward, I think there's going to be a very strong position, a very strong stance taken in terms of attempts to make up for lack of political capital by sort of trying to resuscitate something that we've pretty much moved past it. But it's definitely not lost.
Just to scare the living daylights out of the next three presenters, I'm now going to take the conversation uncomfortably a little bit more personal. After so many years, surely you must be bored stiff. Your strengths must be corporate strengths. Your weaknesses must be corporate weaknesses. Even Warren Buffett is retiring. Talk to us about, hey, geez, how many more years of Niel Pretorius at DRD?
I think I'll retire the day that when I go to Exco and I propose something, my colleagues say to me, my goodness, that is such a damn good idea.
You know they're online, eh? You know they are. You know they are listening to this.
The day that happens, the day, you know, we have this, we actually joke about it, it's fully supported, you know. I never hear those words. I stumble out of Exco and I'm tired. I need to lie down on the couch in my office and just take a nap for 15 minutes. So the day they start agreeing with me, that's the day I believe that my job's done, and then I'll move on. Then I've become irrelevant.
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, it must be nicer to be a geologist, perhaps even an engineer. I actually think it's about the caliber of the person, the commitment, and I think we can all see why Niel Pretorius has led a very old, stale, dying business into a future which is spectacular. One of our heroes, Niel Pretorius, baie dankie. Thank you.